He liked to run early in the morning, before the sun came up, before the world remembered what it hated about people like him, before anyone had the chance to see his face and make a decision about who he was, before he even said a word. It was his peace, his escape, shoes laced, music low, mind clear. But on February 23 RD, the road he ran would change forever. Because that day, someone decided he didn't belong. They didn't see a runner. They didn't see a neighbor. They didn't see a son, a brother, a friend. They saw danger. They saw a threat. And they called the cops. But they didn't wait for them to arrive. They became the cops, the judge, the jury, and in their minds, the executioners. 2 trucks, 3 men, 1 gun tucked. They chased him down like he was prey, cornered him, and when he tried to turn, tried to live, they took that from him. 3 shots. In broad daylight. In America. For jogging. His name was Ahmaud Arbery. He was 25. But this story isn't about how he died. It's about how he lived. And how, even in death, he kept running. Running through courtrooms. Through prose. Through the cracks in this country's promises. Ahmaud never wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to breathe. He wasn't marching. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't fighting. He was running. But this country has a way of chasing down black men who dare to be free. Who dare to exist without explanation. Without fear. Without submission. And so, like so many before him, Ahmaud's freedom was mistaken for defiance. And defiance, in America, can cost you everything. His mother sat in silence when they told her. They didn't call it murder. They said it was a misunderstanding. A confrontation. A case of mistaken identity. But it wasn't. It was history. Repeating. Louder. This time with cell phone footage. This time with proof. This time, we couldn't look away. The world watched a man fall. Watched as his legs gave out. Not from exhaustion but from bullets. And in that moment, something shifted. Because we all knew. That could have been any of us. But the story didn't end in the street. It kept running. Through the outrage. Through the silence of officials who tried to hide the truth. Through a justice system that tried to delay it. And yet, it came. Slow. Painful. But it came. Because his mother refused to sit quietly. Because his father demanded answers. Because people who never knew his name filled the streets with signs that said it loud. Ahmaud Arbery. It took 74 days to arrest the men who killed him. 2 months. Of excuses. Of cover-ups. Of waiting. And still, his name ran through the media. Through social feeds. Through hearts that couldn't understand how this keeps happening. You see, the thing about justice in America is, it doesn't always walk. It crawls. It stumbles. It gasps for air. But sometimes, runs. Fueled by grief. By truth. By a mother's tears and a nation's anger. On November 24, 2021, nearly 2 years later, a jury convicted all 3 men. Not because the system worked, but because the people forced it to. Because silence is a luxury that black parents cannot afford. Because Ahmaud's story is not unique, but this time, it was undeniable. They called the cops on him for jogging. But the call that mattered came later. When the verdict was read. When the gavel dropped. When the courtroom fell still, and justice finally said, "We see you." And that is what this story is about. Not just about a man who ran, but about a world that chased truth, even when it tried to hide. About how a single moment of violence can wake a sleeping nation. And how a single mother's pain can light a fire that even time cannot extinguish. If Ahmaud could speak, he might tell us this. Don't let them define your story by how it ends. Run your own race. Not for their approval, but for your own peace. And maybe that's the lesson we carry. That justice isn't a finish line. It's a direction. It's a commitment. It's the courage to keep moving forward, even when your legs are shaking. So we run. For Ahmaud. For every name forgotten. For every voice silenced. We run. Because some truths don't walk. They sprint through our souls, demanding we listen. Because stopping would mean accepting this. And we can't. Not when joggers turn into suspects. Not when skin color becomes a reason to die. Not when mothers have to bury sons whose only crime was being alive. Ahmaud never asked to change the world. He just wanted to see it, to feel the wind, to let his feet carry him to places that felt like freedom. But he became more than just a runner. He became a reminder of how far we still have to go, of how many lies this country tells when it says, justice is blind. Because it's not. It sees skin. It sees class. It sees power. And too often, it looks away. But this time, people didn't look away. They looked closer. They asked questions. They demanded cameras. They marched. Not because they knew Ahmaud personally, but because they knew his story. They saw their brothers in his eyes. Their nephews in his smile. Their own fear in his final moments. And that kind of recognition is the beginning of change. You see, justice didn't walk into that courtroom alone. She was carried there by every voice that spoke out, by every soul that said, no more, by a generation that refused to let silence win again. This wasn't just about 3 men. It was about 3 centuries of broken promises, of erased lives, of crimes excused because of the badge, the neighborhood, or the skin. But when the verdict came, it thundered. Guilty. Not once, not twice, but over and over. Each word like a step on the road back to dignity. Ahmaud's mother cried. Not because it fixed everything, but because for once, the world didn't pretend her son didn't matter. And maybe that's what justice looks like today. Not perfect, not complete, but possible. If we push, if we fight, if we keep running. Because Ahmaud's story isn't over. It lives in every young black man who dares to run freely. It lives in every parent who tells their child, if you get stopped, be careful. Keep your hands visible. Speak softly. It lives in the heart of every teacher who explains history, not the version in the textbooks, but the real one, the bleeding one. It lives in you. It lives in me. And the question is, will we let it fade? Or will we carry it? Will we turn off the news and say, that's not my problem? Or will we step into the pain and say, that's our story too? Because one day, someone will ask us what we did with our voice. And I hope we can say we used it to remember, to honor, to protect. That we didn't just post a hashtag, but we showed up, voted, volunteered, listened, and ran. Not from the truth, but toward it. Ahmaud's legs stopped moving that day. But his story didn't. His truth kept pace. Faster than denial. Stronger than hate. Louder than fear. And every time we say his name, we lace our shoes. We step out the door. And we run. For justice. For change. For the day when jogging while black is no longer a death sentence. Because they called the cops on him for running. But his legacy, that's what won the race. It's quiet now. The cameras have packed up. The crowds have gone home. The hashtags are fewer. The world, as it always does, moved on to the next headline. But for Wanda Cooper-Jones, Ahmaud's mother, there's no moving on. Only moving forward. With the kind of strength that doesn't ask for attention, but commands it anyway. She doesn't wear a cape. She doesn't shout. But every breath she takes is resistance against forgetting. She said, I carried him for 9 months. They killed him in seconds. But I will carry his name for the rest of my life. There are no words for that kind of pain. Only purpose. And it wasn't just her. There were pastors who rewrote sermons. Athletes who refused to play. Students who raised their fists in silence. Lawyers who worked without sleep. And people, everyday people, who looked in the mirror and asked themselves, would I have stayed silent if it were my child? And for the first time, some answered differently. You see, America doesn't change by accident. It changes when people decide the discomfort of truth is better than the convenience of denial. It changes when we stop saying, that's just how things are, and start asking, but what if they could be better? Ahmaud was not the first. Trayvon, Tamir, Brianna, George. So many names, it becomes a list too heavy to carry. But we must carry it anyway. Because they were real. They laughed. They loved. They had plans. They were not statistics. They were stories. Unfinished stories. And now, we finish them with how we live. With how we vote. With who we defend. With who we believe. Because racism isn't always a gunshot. Sometimes it's a whisper behind a locked door. Sometimes it's a hiring decision. Sometimes it's a law written in language that sounds neutral, but cuts deep. We can't only show up after a tragedy. We have to show up before it happens. So there won't be a next time. But there will be next times. Because change is slow. And people resist what threatens their power. That's why this story doesn't end with a courtroom win. It begins there. The real verdict is written in what we do next. What you do. What I do. Ahmaud's shoes are empty now. But we've got our own. And they're made for more than walking. They're made for showing up. For standing ground. For speaking truth. Even when your voice shakes. Even when it costs you something. Especially then. Because if one young man jogging down a quiet road can make the world stop and listen, what could we all do? If we just kept running? Running toward truth. Toward equity. Toward a future where kids like Ahmaud make it home. Not because they're lucky, but because the world finally changed. So now it's your turn. Lace up. Run your leg of the journey. In courtrooms. In classrooms. In boardrooms. In conversations at the dinner table. Let them be uncomfortable. Let the silence be broken. Because Ahmaud ran his race. And now, we run for him. It's been months. Years even. But some mornings, the road still remembers him. The path where his feet once pounded. The breeze that kissed his skin. The sun that didn't care about his skin color. Just that he was alive. Sometimes you can almost hear him there. Not in fear, but in freedom. Because the lie they told, that he didn't belong, is slowly being buried beneath the truth we now speak louder. Ahmaud was a son. A brother. A friend. He wasn't perfect. None of us are. But he was human. He was alive. And that should have been enough. There's a picture of him, smiling. Eyes full of fire. Teeth showing. Hope dancing at the edge of his lips. That image. It haunts and heals. It reminds us why we must keep going. Because this isn't just about black and white. It's about right and wrong. It's about whether we will choose fear. Or humanity. And you know what? Real justice isn't a verdict. It's when a father no longer has to teach his son how to survive a traffic stop. It's when a mother doesn't flinch every time her child leaves the house. It's when joggers don't need witnesses. And skin doesn't feel like a target. Real justice is quiet. It's felt in the absence of fear. In the presence of peace. We aren't there yet. But we're closer than we were. Because of Ahmaud. Because of his mother, who refused to be silenced. Because of people, strangers, who marched as if he were their own. And now, the baton is in your hands. This is your chapter. What will you do? Will you scroll past injustice, or stop and speak? Will you whisper when they laugh at the wrong jokes, or will you say, no, that's not okay? Will you shrink into comfort, or stretch into courage? You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be loud. You just have to care. And keep caring. Especially when the cameras are off. They called the cops on Ahmaud for running. But they couldn't stop what he started. Because he wasn't running from something. He was running toward something. A better world. A freer one. One where we're seen, not just judged. Where we're heard, not just accused. Where we're loved, not just tolerated. So run. Even when you're tired. Even when they doubt you. Even when it's uphill. Run like it matters. Because it does. Run, because someone once tried to stop a boy with a dream and strong legs. But what they didn't realize is that you can't shoot what's already become a movement. Ahmaud Arbery ran with purpose. Now we walk with his memory. We speak with his name. And we fight, not with fists, but with truth. Because justice didn't die that day. It woke up. And it's still running.